so I was in the roughest part of town, and I was just a 45-kilo 19-year-old with no idea. So from Dandenong Cells, I got transported to the women's prison because apparently I was in actually quite a lot of trouble. And I wasn't really aware of that until the drugs got out of my system. And my mother so kindly told me on the phone, Hales, you're not getting out of this one. And at that point, she was ringing the informant that wanted me to go back to jail. But as that happened, the rehab that I went to, which is where I met Jack, was actually returning her call, and I got given an ultimatum from Jason, and he just said, you can either go to jail or come meet us tomorrow. And I was like, oh.
Hey guys, just a really super quick one before we jump into the show. If you could like, subscribe and follow us on whatever platform you're watching or listening on, that would be greatly appreciated. It helps us to hack the algorithm and reach more people looking for help and support. Also, guys, this episode comes with a trigger warning because of the content that we're talking about. Because of that as well, we do get shadow banned sometimes on social media websites because of the graphic nature of our content. So if you want to have the real, raw, uncut, unfiltered conversations, join our free newsletter that comes out weekly. It's called the Good Gear Newsletter. It's 100% free. You can find the links for that in the description. We help people to beat addiction with some tips and tricks, help people to build their AOD careers, alcohol and drug careers, with professionals that we talk to, and push for better policy change with the policy work that myself and some of the team does as well. So join that below if you want to have those raw conversations. But let's jump into the show. Peace. We did one podcast ago and it was a year ago. I can't even believe that was like a whole year ago that we did that pod. Tell us, give us the 3-minute recap of your story.
3 minutes and go. So I started using, I can't do it. So I started using meth and everything that came with it when I was around 19. From there, I stepped into the life that comes with ice, I guess. Like, I lost my job, and, you know, like, my family had kind of gotten, they disowned me. I started hanging out with, you know, those, the individuals.
Degenerates.
Yeah, maybe. I was one, though. I can't judge. I started hanging out with them because all of the normality in my life had gone down. And with that came, I guess, all the crime that people do when they're using to support their habits, and also just to fill in the days because you're up for days and, you know, you got to do something, right? And, you know, in 3 minutes, it's hard to explain what I went through, but you can add a dash of psychosis in there. And by a dash, like a good glass full of psychosis. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, so my mind was really unwell, and I weighed about 45 kilos by the end of it. But outside of all of that, I wasn't a very good criminal, unfortunately. It was not my calling. So I started to get arrested just randomly, and by randomly, I'd fall asleep in my car and I would get arrested every time. And from there, like, you get arrested, you get a court date. Everyone told me to go to your court dates. I never went to my court dates. And then one fateful night, I was in a stolen vehicle. I didn't know it was stolen, with one of my co-accused. And we were both arrested, and I did my interview, and I, you know, waited to be let out as per usual. And officer someone, I won't say his name actually, he informed me that I would not be leaving, and thus started my weekend in the Dandenong Cells, and then being transported.
The good old dandy cells. And for everybody listening, because so Hales, we've been doing a bit of like YouTube, and we've got quite a bit of an American audience and stuff like that. So for everyone listening, like in Melbourne, and for people that aren't in Melbourne, Dandenong's probably one of the it's like one of the rougher suburbs in Melbourne. I don't know if you'd call it the roughest if you're ranking it and shit like that, but it's up there.
It's up there.
Yeah, it's not Brighton by no means. It's
Yeah,
Dandenong.
that's right.
Yeah, so I was in the roughest part of town, and I was just a 45-kilo 19-year-old with no idea in this cell with all of these like older women who were actually quite lovely, but that was the start of a pretty intense couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So from Dandenong cells, I got transported to the women's prison,
Yeah.
Dame Phyllis Frost Centre. Got
Yeah.
tongue-tied. And I was there and going back and forth between the prison and the Ringwood courts to try and make bail, because apparently I was in actually quite a lot of trouble, and I wasn't really aware of that until the drugs got out of my system, and my mother so kindly told me on the phone, Hales, you're not getting out of this one. And if I've got more time in my 3 minutes, pretty much from there, do you want me to go into how I got into recovery? Because
3 minutes is just a fuck around thing that I do with people. You got longer than 3 minutes.
Well, shit, I could have given so much more detail. So I was lucky enough to be bailed to my mum's house.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't think it was that lucky at the time, but so I was bailed home, and I was under some fairly strict bail conditions. Like I had a curfew, I had to sign in a couple of days a week. I couldn't associate with my co-accused, who I was desperate to associate with, like just was beside myself. I couldn't.
Yeah.
And my mother took on the role of like just being the warden and would not let me pass the front door or the back door or the window. I was not allowed out. But I snuck out because I was naughty. Which thus turned into a very huge argument her and I had in the backyard. And at that point, she was ringing the informant that wanted me to go back to jail. But as that happened, the rehab that I went to, which is where I met Jack, was actually returning her call. So she answered that one instead of calling the officer, and pretty much was given the 2-minute spiel. And she passed the phone to me. I was given the 3-minute spiel maybe, and I got given an ultimatum from Jason at the day hub.
Yeah.
And he just said, you can either go to jail or come meet us tomorrow. And I was like, oh, well, come meet you tomorrow. And then he told me to tell my mum I was sorry and to give her a hug, and I told him to shove that somewhere.
And I think I told this on the last podcast, but yeah, so I was kind of pretty new into my like career at the time. So how long ago was this? How many years ago was this? 10 years. 10. Fuck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I was 10 years off the meth in August.
Congratulations. How good's that?
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Yeah, so fuck, I can't believe that was 10 years ago. I remember I was sitting with Jace in his office, because like we were talking about something, and I can remember as clear as day. He said like, "Oh, hold on, I've got to call this
Robin.
this lady back that I'd spoken to. Just give us a sec." And he called your mum, Robin, the Rob dog, yeah, and and I remember like kind of half like hearing and listening to the conversation, just how Jason was like talking and stuff. And I remember thinking like, fucking hell, like this Hayley chick, she's going to come in, she's going to be like staunch as, she's going to be like, I don't know, she's going to weigh like, 100 kegs and like can punch on and all this shit, right? Like, I remember thinking, oh, she's going to be hectic, because like, I remember Jace hang up the phone and he was like, yeah, they were fucking yelling at each other and all this shit. And then Hayley comes in. Then was that the next day that you came in?
Yeah.
The next day, couldn't even like, was just staring at the ground because you struggled to like look people in the eyes when you first came in, and you're like this little like petite thing. You kind of like looked like gothic. You were just like super like boned out. And I remember in the moment thinking, what the fuck is going on? How is this like some chick that's going to go to prison?
Yeah. This thug. I was pretending to be frail and afraid. It was all a show.
Yeah. It's so funny. So funny. So, wow, I can't believe that was 10 years ago. So, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, from what you've seen now through your own recovery, and we'll get into the work stuff, but from working with people and stuff, like, how would you kind of rank the level of your like addiction, you know, on the scale of like super bad and all of that kind of stuff?
Oh, that's so hard. I guess like if I step into comparison of some of the lives that I see with some clients that I work with, or just like through like the last 10 years, I could probably give myself a lesser number on that scale. However, I lived my addiction. I know how tough it was. I know exactly what I went through, the stuff that I know that no one knows, etc., etc. So to be honest with you, I would still put it at like, I want to give myself like a 8.5, maybe a 9.
Yeah.
Not to be badass, but just because like it wasn't going well for me.
100%. And I didn't tee up that question with Hayley, but correct answer. That's what I wanted you to say. And it's such a good point because we have like lots of different people listening to the show that like it's the natural thing that people do. So, I speak to a lot of people through the programs we run now that, because it's kind of, I guess, like the way it's structured is people can still work and things like that. So we get a lot of people that are using like cocaine and maybe are doing it in like binge settings and they compare to other drugs and they think like, hey, it's not as bad or whatever. But you live your like addiction, you know what I mean? And it's like, it doesn't make it any less worse just because somebody else has something that goes on in their life, right?
Yeah, or like because somebody's been using longer and is using polysubstances, or that stuff doesn't matter. It's the individual. And it took me a really long time to realize that, because when I was in early recovery and I'd go to like NA, for example, and I'd hear people who had been using for, I don't know, they'd be like, oh, was using for 30 years, for example. And then I'd be like, oh shit, I better lie about how long I used for, because like they're going to think I'm a joke because I only used for 3 and a bit. Even and a bit, I'm like, is that a lie? I don't know. I've conditioned myself, but it's.
Hey, really quick one, guys. Are you or somebody you love struggling with alcohol and drugs, and the support that you're looking for, you're just not quite connecting with the traditional approaches? We might be able to help. We do things a little bit differently with a unique delivery method and unique program. We actually help people to get off alcohol and drugs without having to go to rehab. It's called connection-based living. Links to booking a call, just to have a chat with us and explore, whether we might be the right fit for you or the options that you might want to take in your journey to get healing and recovery and that kind of thing. Links below for that. Connection-based living. We help people to get off alcohol and drugs without going to rehab and do things a little bit differently. Hope to chat to you on the phone if that is the case. And let's jump back into the show.
Nowadays, I realize that the length of use doesn't really matter.
Yeah. It's the consequences internally and externally that is like the fucked up thing.
Oh, and I had them all.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. And that's the thing, like, just for everybody listening, like as a real practical thing, like that's why I don't even like calling it addiction. Like that's what stuff is, but just because there's like stereotypes around it now, you say addiction and people think it's like, I don't know, using every day for like 10 years, shooting heroin, I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Shooting drugs, just doing all.
That's right. But it could just be you use like once a week or once a fortnight, you binge or whatever. It's about like how it impacts you internally and externally. That is the real kind of meat and potatoes and important stuff of what we're talking about.
That's the scale, right? Like I know people who like dabble in, I don't know, like, do we call it party drugs or whatever?
Let's call it that for the sake of that.
And they like it doesn't impact any of their like internally or externals at all. So like it really is just up to the individual and what the drugs do for them.
Yeah, so interesting. So I want to ask you a bit about that as well. And I'll link the previous show that we did in the description so that you can like listen to Hayley's story in a bit more like detail, because I think we did it in a bit more detail.
You did. You gave me 5 minutes last time. I think I listened to it recently, actually. I think it was 5.
But we talked about it longer than that. So your recovery process, talk us through that. Like, because I think it's interesting. You mentioned NA there, but like, do you still go? Like, did you buy into it at the start? Like, tell us about all that. And at the time, by the way, for everybody listening, I was like evangelical about NA. Like, I was all about NA. So,
I'm about to roast you in this.
Yeah, tell us about it.
So the day hab that I went to, it was a 12-step sort of program, which encouraged attendance at 12-step meetings, which I totally see the point in. I do get that. But I guess at first I enjoyed the meetings, and I went and I met people, and I understood the purpose of me being there, getting a sponsor, doing the steps, making like recovery friends, I got it, to fill in the days, eradicate boredom, blah, blah, blah. But as I got cleaner and my mind started to clear up a bit, and I started to have these internal goals that I didn't realize I had, for example, wanting to get a job, wanting to study, just wanting to be normal again, normal. My drive to go to NA kind of decreased. Because I wasn't getting out of it what I was at the start. And I don't think that's because I wasn't giving into it what I needed to. I just think that it had served its purpose for me. And I had created friendships within the sober sort of spaces that I could hang out with outside of NA. I didn't need to go to meetings. And I started to kind of lean more toward just building my life up from the ditches that I'd left it in. And with that came a little bit of judgment from my dear friend Jack. Not judgment, sorry, but a bit of motivation to sort of get me back into the rooms, in the sense of, Hales, if you don't go, you will use.
Which I ended up snapping out of myself.
And calling me, be like, Hayley, I stopped going to meetings. I'm like, well done. And then I got worried. I'm like, shit, maybe he'll use.
So funny. That's interesting. So I don't know if you know the answer to this. We're just kind of shooting the breeze, but do you think, like, what I think it is that about 12-step meetings that I've learned, because I'm the same as you, like I cannot deny that going to 12-step meetings fucking changed my life. Like, it did. It just, I cannot deny that. It definitely changed my life, taught me heaps of stuff that I still use in my life today. And there's still stuff from like 12-step programs when I'm working with people that I do with people, because it's like an important part of like their healing journey or whatever. But what I've kind of come to realize through talking to heaps of people that have got inverted commas like recovery through other methods is like there's kind of certain elements that like make up what people need to do to get recovery. What were they for you? Like you kind of mentioned, like, it's kind of sounds like it's a bit of a cliche now, but like connection with like a like community. How did you find friends and sober people outside of 12-step programs and stuff like that?
I can answer this, I think.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
And look, 10 years ago is actually quite a long time ago, but
Massive.
From what I remember, like I made friends within Dayhab, and and when I say that, I also consider you as a friend, and I considered you one back then as well. So I had you. I've got Jack. I got my, the one levitating above us all. And then, sorry.
Don't say that.
I'm pretty sure you said it to me once. That's why it sticks in my head. And then I had made a lovely friend with a female in Dayhab as well, who stuck around for a while. But outside of that, you know, I had a few people I'd met through day hab. Some were a little bit sketchy. One I
Yeah.
loaned money to and never got it back, funnily enough.
Yeah.
And then we're within sort of applying for jobs in beauty, which was kind of like the trade that I had. That was kind of how I started to make more connections, but outside of the rooms and outside of rehab.
Yeah.
And I also reconnected with a lot of my old friends from like from high school and stuff who had sort of rightfully so disowned me as well to a degree, like with love, but I was not a very good friend to have. But you know, put
Yeah.
in the effort to reconnect with them. You know, I landed myself a job at a local beauty place, solarium. It was a solarium and
Yeah.
beauty. Um, and yeah, I kind of just built on it from there. And I am leaving out, I guess, the most important part, which was that my family, because I was living back at home, albeit they were sus on me because I was dodgy as hell, realistically. They loved me back to life.
Yeah.
And that's super wanky, but it happened. Everyone that I met started to just show me love that I didn't really recognize, but it built me up. You know,
Yeah.
like people would drive me to work to ensure that I was going to the job that I was, you know, that I'd landed myself. Like I was still getting lifts to meetings if I was going. Like people were just looking after me, and I can see it better now than I did back then.
Yeah.
But I was very well supported.
Yeah. 100%. And that's the thing, like, just because it's so interesting. It's like I don't intentionally do it. I think most people do as well, but like I kind of see patterns like when I talk to people and stuff like that. Like it just occurs to me. And you said like the three things that I sort of like believe in that is sort of underlying that you can get from 12-step programs, you can get it from other avenues wherever you want to kind of whatever vehicle you want to do your recovery. But you said that you had like those intrinsic goals that you kind of discovered and realized. So people kind of need purpose. So you got that one. You found like community and connection with other people. And then you also like found kind of connection and worked on yourself. So how hard was it working on yourself? How hard's that bit? Is that the hardest bit?
I'm still working on myself. It is because you I feel like I was kind of like, what is it, like Mr. Miyagi from Karate Kid or whatever. Like I didn't realize I was working on myself. Like I was being
Love it.
like I knew it. Like I still have all my books from rehab, for example, and I read back in them and I think like shit, I was actually working on myself.
Yeah.
And it was difficult because you kind of have to face. I will admit, I probably didn't go as deep as I could have back then.
But
you know,
sometimes, like that's another thing for everyone listening. Sorry to cut you off. I don't know if you agree with this because we're going to get into it. But Hayley now works in the field and is a superstar. And the field, I say, like alcohol and drug support
not out on the
services and
farm.
stuff. That's right. That's right. Not out on the farm. That's right.
Bad joke.
That was a good one, actually. I liked it.
Thank you.
But yeah, sometimes in those early days, sometimes it can actually be less helpful to go super deep. Do you know what I mean? Because you're so fucking vulnerable and fragile, you know? Yeah.
And raw, and just raw. Like
Yeah.
I remember in Dayhab we had to do our life story.
Yeah.
And I wrote mine on like one piece of paper and it had no information on anything. And I think that if I had gone deeper, like I probably would have remained at Dayhab for another 6 months. Like I wasn't ready because I didn't even understand the stuff that had happened or what was going on underneath.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
I don't know if it's important to note, and it makes me sound like a bit of like a woohoo tree hugging hippie here. But another thing that I did do during my early days, actually for like at least 12 months, is I also went and saw like a energetic healer, like a Reiki master once a week.
You got me into this shit. Did you know that?
I don't know. Did I like properly get you into it?
Yeah. You did. Not because you were like trying to convert me, but you were like, so like you would come in just for all the professionals listening as well.
Oh yeah.
I don't make friends with all my clients.
Oh yeah.
Exposed. That's right. It's sort of like we weren't friends like this.
Yeah.
Obviously, when I was working with Hayley, this happened.
No.
We became mates like years later through like
Yeah.
professional avenues, just so that everybody
Mhm.
knows. But I remember, I just occurred to me that I'm like, fuck,
Yeah.
there could be like psychologists and
Yeah.
professionals listening to me going, this is so fucking
Oh, yeah,
unprofessional.
right.
Where's the boundaries? That
Yeah, she's talking about Reiki. They were best friends. What do you mean?
That's
Yeah,
funny.
poor choice of words earlier.
No,
Friends
no,
later.
no, no. It's
Mm.
fine. It's all right. It's all right. It's all right. But just on that, sorry, I'm jumping around a bit here. I'll go back to that Reiki thing. But I actually rail against that in my practice. I don't know if you find the same. Like, obviously, there's got to be a level of boundaries that you have with clients, but
Mm.
like, I do share like parts of myself to an extent because
Mm.
fucking at the end of the day, it's like I really disagree with some of the things that they teach you in like therapy, like in counseling and stuff like that, to sort of disengage with like emotional stuff. And, you know, it's so
Mm.
strange. Like, I've found that the human to human kind of experience is the thing that actually helps people to heal, you know, because like we're
Mm.
having a human experience. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, you used
We
to
will.
come in and talk about fucking Reiki and all this shit. And I was like, what? Like, and you were like, yeah, it's fucking doing this. It's helping, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, I've never heard of this stuff before. So I went and tried all these like holistic healing things. It got me into like somatic therapy experiences and all this kind of stuff, which have really
Yeah.
changed my life. So there you go.
Mm.
Don't know if you knew that,
Wow.
but yeah.
No, like I remember you like querying me on it, but I didn't actually know that you went out and explored.
I
Um,
did. I did.
yeah, I used to also like when I'd go have Reiki, he'd this is weird. He'd have like a foot bath out and
I
like pour
remember
like
telling you.
water and like fancy salts in it, and it would like drag out the toxins from my body,
Yeah.
and the water would be really fucked up afterwards. So I believe it. Like those toxins, the demons were coming out,
Yeah.
and I thoroughly did enjoy it amongst all the other stuff I was doing to work on myself. That's more textbook.
You know, like, but do you know that, like, sure, there was like a Reiki practitioner would be kind of coming at that with like a spiritual element as well, but there's actually like good science behind that, you know, around like detoxifying your body and
Mm.
getting like people do that shit to like get all the toxins and stuff like that out of your body. So I'm sure that like helped.
Yeah, it really did. I'd be quite alarmed at the water. I was like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you did a fair bit of healing and
Mm.
when was the point, like, cuz I think that's interesting for people to know. People always ask me like, when am I going to feel better? Like when, and I know it's subjective, but when was that for you? When did you start to feel like, fuck, this isn't a slog anymore. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling okay.
Ooh. I reckon minimum 9 months.
Yeah.
Like the first 9 months were life was better and it was getting better, but it, you know, I still had, I don't know if I say like obsession to use, but I still had to really um really sort of do like practice like thought stopping techniques, so to speak, because the desire to use would come in like when, like no matter, like if I had an emotion that made me uncomfortable, if I was home alone and a bit bored, you know, like all that sort of stuff still came in. But
Yeah.
probably from, I remember going to my 9 months meeting at, I think it was Blackburn or something. And my mum drove me and we went and she bought me my own Just for Today book and she wrote me a cute little note in it.
Yeah.
And like it's all a bit hazy from back then, but I do kind of remember that point onward I was like, oh, things got easier.
Yeah.
I didn't stop fighting with the people I live with, aka my mum.
Yeah.
But the desire to use sort of drifted off. And again, I'm going to repeat, like I started, you know, I was really reconnecting with a lot of old friends and making new ones through my job at the beauty salon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, look, I spent a lot of time on my own,
Yeah.
which has helped me in to, you know, because spending time on your own is good. But that was pretty tough. Like I'd spend every Saturday night on my own, just, you know, thinking about the old days when I'd be at the Irish or just like out clubbing, and I'd just be
Yeah.
on the decking cigarette after cigarette, chain smoking, sipping water, listening to like heavy metal music, like a real gronk. But like that's how I got through. I just got through by just hustling through the loneliness and just remembering that like the next day would be okay.
Yeah.
If I didn't use.
Yeah. So interesting. So interesting. All right. So what I wanted to talk to you about today is obviously you went through that whole experience, and a little bit like me, you now work in the alcohol and drug space, but you mentioned that your first kind of jobs was like in the beauty industry, which you kind of did before. Are you happy that you did that before you went straight into alcohol and drug work? Was that a good thing? Yeah. Can you explain why?
And hindsight is a really handy thing here. At the time, I probably didn't realize it was better for me. But it allowed me the space away from using and from, you know, being always around that sort of talk and those, not those people, but that kind of cohort of individuals. And I had to work on I had to work on my people skills. I still couldn't look people in the eye. I still couldn't admit if I'd done something wrong without wanting to cry. Like I had a lot of stuff to work on. And I think that if I went into like AOD work, I don't think I would have survived long, whether that would have been relapsing or whether that just would have been quitting and never returning to it because I don't do well with failure. So I think working in beauty, it helped me build on my people skills, my social skills, looking people in the eye when I speak to them, acknowledging, you know, if I made mistakes. And I met a lot of really nice people throughout that period, of whom are still, like, I can think of 2 girls off the top of my head who I met through my 2 beauty jobs, and they're still 2 of my best friends. So I think a lot of good came from the from waiting before I went into AOD work.
Yeah. And it's super interesting for everybody listening. Like, I don't know how to explain it because it's not like a regret that I have, because there was, like, I don't regret it because, like, I've loved my career and stuff. But, you know, like, hindsight's amazing. If I was able to kind of reset it, hearing your story about how you're able to, like, form this sort of, like, new identity and stuff like that, I kind of wish that I had a similar, like, experience to you, where maybe I went out and did, like, some other kind of work first, because you do, like, and this might not be the case for everybody. Like, people might just always get straight back into it. And my skill set is around connecting with other people and helping other people and stuff like that. So it was like a natural fit, but it is that identity piece, isn't it? Like, and kind of finding yourself. And as you said, like, building friends around something different and just, like, kind of moving out of that space. I think that's really important, because for me, like, I couldn't, like I did make friends with people at work, but they were all people that I was going to, like, you know, NA with and stuff anyway. So everything in my life was just still around drugs and alcohol, even though it was more healthy in recovery. But it kind of, like, entrenched me and not got me stuck, but got me kind of stuck more in that identity. Whereas, like, listening to you, it's really interesting how you were able to, like, build these, like, outside circles before you kind of came back into the space, you know?
We're cut, like, what is it? Like, we're two peas in a pod, but also, like, very different pods, but very similar. I know that I'm totally wrecking that analogy there, but similar stories. We just did it that little bit different. And, you know, as you were saying that, I was thinking about the word identity. I do believe that if I had just gone right into AOD work, I would have forever thought that that's all I was worthy of. That's all I had to give. Like, I've used drugs and I fell into this, so therefore that's just who I am. And I don't think that would have worked out too well for me. And a funny little thing I was just thinking is that I reckon if I had like stepped into, like, AOD work in those early days, I didn't know how to not fall in love with every man I felt like I thought was quite handsome in the rooms. Like, I didn't know how to not do that. So I was just thinking, like, I just would have been unhinged. Like, I would have, you know, thought that everyone was the love of my life. I would have thought I was just, bound to be an AOD worker forever, forever. Like, it just would never have worked out.
Yeah. And this is the thing, it's so interesting. And the reason why I bring that up is because, like, there's this whole conversation around lived experience, and I really want it to happen, and I really want it to be kind of a function or entrenched in, the public system of alcohol and drugs, because it's so powerful, right? Like, I think for you, I don't know, I could be like, not because I'm special, but, meeting me and Jason and Mick, and then, some of the other people in the program, because we had that lived experience, it probably opened you up to, like, listening a little bit more or whatever it is. Is that true? Is that kind of the truth? Yeah.
I don't, I'm not sugarcoating anything here to, like, toot your horn. I honestly remember thinking when I went to Dayhab, like, how cool are these guys? Like,
Yeah.
they, like, you knew what you were talking about. You had not similar experiences to me, but, like, I understood what you were saying. I understood your language, and I just felt very, I'm going to say the word understood again. I just felt really understood
Yeah.
and in the right place.
Yeah.
And sometimes I forget that.
Yeah.
Especially when I work in the industry, when I started working as a peer, and I was like, no one's going to be interested in what I have to say, and I'm just a lame girl who used to do drugs. And I forgot how powerful it was for me to be around people that had cleaned time up when I was in early recovery. So it's a nice little reminder, that question.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because that bit is so powerful, and it was the same for me. Like, the guy that helped me, and Jason helped me a lot, and then I ended up working with him. But there was another guy before that in, like, a rehab that I went to, and it literally, like, I wouldn't be sitting here today if if I hadn't met that guy. And I say it all the time, not because of his story. His story is completely different. He fucking drank alcohol, and he was from a posh part of town. But the way that he was able to, like, intimately describe to me how he was thinking and feeling and all that shit, it, like, blew me away and allowed me to trust. So there's that's why I'm so keen for that lived experience thing to be rolled out and really entrenched in a massive way in the space. But as you just said, there's this really, like, complicated kind of problem of, like, how do you protect people, like, kind of from themselves a little bit at the start as well, and, like, and just ensure that, like, people going through the service are getting, having a good experience as well, and that, the person with the lived experience is, I don't know what the fucking politically correct and appropriate words are, so everybody listening, just take it with a grain of salt. You know what I mean?
Fill in the blank.
But yeah, that there's, like, not inappropriate behavior happening, or just, like, things are kind of done the right way and everyone's kept safe. You know what I mean? Do you have any thoughts about that from your experience of being, like, a peer worker? Like, yeah.
Yes, I do have thoughts on that. I was just thinking, keeping the peer safe and supported is, like you were saying, it is super important, and I don't think it's not acknowledged in the space, especially now that there's actually, like, a peer workforce.
Yeah.
So there's group supervision going, there's individual supervision going, there's peer training, there's there's all these resources around there to ensure that the peers, like, we're a gang. But, like,
that's interesting that you say that. And so we're in Victoria. It's way more established in Victoria than other places, and it's really interesting. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it. But yeah, sorry, keep going, because that's good to hear that was helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, maybe my experience is a bit different. Becoming so the word peer had no meaning to me when I actually got the job where I was the peer.
Yeah.
Because I came from a separate a support worker role at a what do you call it, like an inpatient private rehab, like where they stay.
Yeah.
And I was and so support worker versus peer, actually very different. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
And so when I applied for this peer role, I thought it was going to be kind of like support work, but like you got to go home because it was at a 9 to 5 job. And I thought, yeehaw.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. It was the actual program itself really, I don't want to say the word glorify, but really pumped up the tires of the peer. And me, with my low self-esteem that I wear on my sleeve, was not ready for that sort of recognition of like me as Hayley with this lived experience. And
Yeah.
it was through some really good support of another team member that I had at the time who also had a lived experience that kind of helped me build up my confidence and see the
Yeah.
value of the peer. But that took a bit of time. And I wasn't really working under the best supervisor who she quite enjoyed minimizing my role in the group.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit shaky at first, but it did get better.
Yeah.
And that was through like supervision with the new team leader that came in, and he was great. He had a lived experience too, actually.
Yeah.
And then it kind of went on from there. I did the peer training at Shark, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sorry, I just built on it from there. So I do think my entry into it was a bit different. It wasn't as supported, but it did get better.
Yeah. So what's the difference between like a support worker and a peer? Like if you were to kind of define it, like how is it different?
I define it by the job itself is different. My experience is probably different. Support work to me, which I know isn't the definition, is doing sleepover shifts, driving clients to meetings. I don't know,
like a case manager kind of.
Yeah. So where I was working, like they didn't tell you not to share your story, but it was kind of, you didn't really know what your place was. Like, could I share it? Will that be useful, or do I what do I do with this knowledge that I have? But then the peer role that I was in, that word peer genuinely was like, Hayley, sit in group and engage in the topics of each group and use your story, or, like, don't glorify and all that sort of stuff, but use it in a helpful way. And I realized I didn't really answer your question all that well there, but for
No,
me,
that was perfect. Perfect.
Support work to me, I didn't have the best time in that role. So support work to me is dead to me. Peer, by the way, on the other hand, hold that close to my heart.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting, but like you kind of touching on a few things here, like, because it goes beyond like just the peer stuff. It's just like the industry in general. There's not like a good amount of support, is there? Like, it could be a lot better in terms of the supervision and mentoring and guidance and all that kind of stuff through.
I do think that they are getting better, and keep in mind, I'm not in a peer position anymore. So, and I haven't been for probably, I think it's 2 years. It could actually be longer than 2 years.
Shit.
Yeah.
Time flies.
Oh, it's been, I think 2.5 years I've been out of the peer role.
Yeah.
So I'm sure in 2.5 years things have gotten better, and someone I know is like running, heading a peer workforce, and things are moving.
Yeah. No, but that's what that's what I wanted to ask. Like, that's what I wanted to ask you and talk about. Like, so
just ignore me plugging my battery in, by the way.
Totally fine. Go for it.
We can edit this out.
It's no, I'm gonna leave it. It's real drug talk. It's how we roll.
We're on low power mode. Hold on. Sorry, Jack.
Boom, we're back. Sorry, everybody. We disappeared into the Riverside universe. The black hole of the internet, which always happens. So I think what we were talking about, we were just trying to work out exactly where we're up to. But what I was going to say is that, like, it's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about today, because the peer stuff is so important, as we touched on, and the power of it, and some of the kind of things that have to be taken into consideration to make sure it's like safe and supported and all that kind of stuff. But one of the cool things is, and I don't know, like, I've been trying for years to kind of get some initiative going on a national level to like supercharge it through. But like, the alcohol and drug workforce is like one of the major one of the major worries in like the national alcohol and drug workforce strategy, in terms of like concerns and surveys, is the aging workforce and then the lack of like workforce coming through. And you're like a typical example of exactly, there's like a whole bunch of peers there waiting and ready to kind of work and get involved in it. And what it does is create career pathways for you. So what was that like for you? Like, so you were doing your peer role, and then how did you kind of go, fuck, I actually want to do a bit more with like my career, and not like upgrade, because it's not like they're, as you said, they're different roles, but you know, take on a more like, I think you're doing like a more clinical role now. Is that right?
I sure am. And I'm going to be so honest with you and say, I did not want to leave the peer role. Like, oh God, that was so, like, I know, like, subconsciously I was ready to move on.
Yeah.
But consciously, I loved my role. I'd found I'd found my niche. I was finally enjoying going to work, which I hadn't previously in my other job. And I knew all the topics. I built on my confidence because I had to run my own social support group, and that for me was really confronting, because I had to face my fear of, well, it's not like public speaking, but it kind of was. And and I just felt like the onus was on me to ensure that that group ran well. And so I had to really build on some stuff, and I started to get into real good rhythm. And then the place where I work, there's actually quite a few different teams there. And I'm not going to say like I was close. I mingle in the building. I make friends. Like, I'm not a dud in the workplace. So people got to know me, I guess, on more of a level than just that, that random peer that they hired. And through connection through the workplace, when a role was available in the mental health services side of things, it was put forward to me like, oh, would you like to interview for this? And this was 6 months prior to when I actually did end up taking them up on that offer. So the first time it was offered, I was a hell no. But it got the what do you call them?
The cogs turning.
Yeah, like, oh, they want me to interview for that. Like, does that mean that maybe I am more than a beauty therapist who used to do drugs and landed in a bit of a peer role? And then so 6 months down the track, when funnily enough, the same kind of role popped up. We've got great staff retention, by the way. No, we do. And then that time around, there was that thing where my first thought was yes. My second thought was no. And that was really different. And although I was beside myself because I knew I had to do it, and by beside myself, I mean crying that I had to let go of what I felt safe in. It was time, and my supervisor at the time, he really we really spoke about it at length. And although I was a blubbering mess, he encouraged me, I guess, to take it. And then and then the manager of the mental health services team as well was really encouraging as well. And again, this kind of goes back to when I was getting clean. I seem to land myself in positions or like around people that are really supportive of me. And I like, I'm not saying
you're a good human, man.
I guess so. But like, again, in hindsight, I look at certain moments in my life and I think like, fuck, like I actually have some really good people around me who believe in me, and so I'm carried by the faith of others sometimes. And then I stepped into the mental health services team as a care coordinator, which is kind of like a case manager, but it sounds cool. And I stepped into that role, and I've been in that role for, I think it's like 2 and a bit years. But I also left out when I was the peer. That was a 3-day a week. And when I'd been at my place of work for about, I think it was maybe just under 6 months, they actually offered me a position in a different program there, which I did 2 days a week. So I actually was the peer and not a clinician, but like a case worker, I guess.
Yeah.
from kind of like the get-go, which I think also did help me build on my strengths and my, I don't know, my skills or something.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Nah, and it's so interesting. I'm if it's okay with you, I'm gonna try and like show this podcast to a couple people because that have like some influence. Just because it's exactly like the stepping stones and the process that I see that can be kind of supercharged to like I guess like cultivate the workforce shortages that we have, and the pathway might start for people as peers, but there's just so much on offer to like build people's confidence and
Yeah.
like self-esteem and self-worth, and help them to believe in themselves, to move into other roles and do other things in their careers. So since doing this, just to challenge you a little bit, like have you started to think about even more stuff that you want to progress on and do?
Oh, great question. I love to be challenged. Love it. Look, the cogs do turn. However, I don't know. I feel like I hope I'm not talking out of turn here, but I feel like we've all had a bad day at work where we get on ethical jobs and we're like, where am I going to go to next? Because fuck this place.
Yeah.
And but outside of those random days, I don't actually know exactly what it is that I want to move more into.
Yeah.
And that frustrates me because I feel having goals I know is important, but I can't quite ascertain what area it is that I exactly want to go to and what I feel like I will grow in.
Yeah.
Whether that's going to study and doing like a university sort of thing, like, wow, that would be wild. But I don't know what to study. And yeah, I don't know.
But would you say, and sorry, I should have phrased the question differently because I don't want to get you in trouble with your workplace, because that's not actually what I meant.
Okay, cool. I'm like, what the hell?
But I meant like, do you now believe, like, say when you do work out, when you want to do something, like, do you now believe that, like, yeah, fuck yeah, I can go and do that university degree, or I can go and do this other more advanced job, or I can do this? That's kind of what I meant. Sorry.
Funny, you got me talking in tangents. Delete that chapter. Yes, like, to answer like simply, like, I do believe that I am capable of stepping into more complex roles with the right support and management style.
Yeah, 100%.
Studying, I'm not too sure because I really detest it, but that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. Okay. So, and just to kind of give everybody an idea as well, like the job and the work that you've moved into and that you're doing now, like it's not like you're doing, I know, like, the word complex care. What's the opposite? What's the appropriate AOD term for non-complex care? Low intensity.
Low intensity.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm not in my program itself. Literally is complex care. Like,
it's
that's
the
it's
most complex care. It's the most complex care. It's probably one of the most hardcore services that you could work in.
I don't know how it happened. I was just like, la-di-da, this looks like a cool place to work, and bam, complex care. Lord help me. So I kind of did land so maybe stepping into something more complex isn't actually the right wording, because I think I've hit the threshold on that. But maybe stepping into something that's less intense in a different sort of space.
Yeah, like rate like, and that's all I meant, is that like is I guess, like, because that's what I'm interested in, is like this career pathway that's created. So like, you started, I know you didn't start as a peer, but you started in kind of a bit of a fucked up, like, support working role, and then moving into like starting as a peer, and then moving into clinician, and then like,
I guess the next is doctor.
That's right. That's right. If you wanted to, but like the thing is that like imagine if you didn't have that get that peer role, you probably wouldn't be doing what you're doing and potentially moving on to doing this other stuff. That's kind of what I'm getting at, right?
And you're bang on. And just for the listeners' sake, I was quitting the industry before I got the peer role.
There you go.
I was I don't know, I'm going to use the term burnt out. I wasn't doing well with the other place.
Yeah.
And then I actually had quite a like life altering car accident.
Yeah.
And then after that, I just had this thought of like, oh, I've got to get my shit together. I can't live like, like I need to feel better. I need to do better. And this peer role just popped up. And I actually think I spoke to you maybe about it, and you encouraged me to apply. But in between that, I was like looking at data entry jobs. Like I was like, I'm leaving, like they can all go and get stuffed. I'm going to be a data person. Yeah. Funnily enough, I do a lot of data entry in my role, but not. So I don't know. The universe works in mysterious ways. It's like, Hayley, here's your data entry, but here's all the complexities that come with it.
Yeah. So interesting. So, you motherfuckers out there that are listening, because I know that there's a few of you that listen that kind of sit in these research roles, and I don't think you motherfuckers, I'm joking, I'm being hyperbolic to try and get your attention, but people that are listening out there that like are in these bureaucratic spaces that are looking at some of this peer stuff, and there's these arguments going back and forth. This is like exactly why it's the cheapest and easy investment to like roll this out on a national level and actually have those structures and supports and create the framework for people, because it will explode the industry and the workforce for the better, because there's like a whole bunch of Hayleys out there that are, interested in using like their expertise of their experience to like help other people, and who knows where that could lead for those people and for the industry as a result of that too,
Yeah. A whole bunch of Hayleys out there. How concerning would that be?
Yeah, I'm kind of fucking worried about it as well, actually. Yeah. No,
joking. There's only one Hayley.
That's right. There's only one Hayley. There's only one Hayley.
Yeah. Though, like, just like, I'll end this with the peer stuff. Stepping from peer to clinician, like, I will admit the transition is actually quite difficult, stepping from using your lived experience verbally to like just having it as knowledge, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not saying that it's a huge no-no for me to disclose lived experience, but it's more so like, I'm more based in skills now than saying, I suggest you do blah because that's what I did. So it's a difficult little transition. Sometimes I go to say very peer stuff and I'm like, oh, is that right? Will it land? And anyway, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. That's interesting. So do you reckon that's kind of a bit of a gap at the moment, like some training around if you do make those like transitions from a peer and the definition and sort of distinguishing between the two?
Yeah, I think that is kind of what I was getting at, because there are some like, God, I say the word like a lot. There are some people out there who are accessing services who don't genuinely want a worker that is always referencing their lived experience. So like, it's all about, like training people in all of those different areas to work with the clients. I don't know, that's the best way possible.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to stop rambling.
No, all good. I think that's a good place to end. That was awesome, man. Like, it's cool. Can I just say, to make you feel uncomfortable, because I know you feel uncomfortable with compliments, I haven't spoken properly to you for a couple months now. And just like talking long form like this, you're just so different, and the progress that you've made is amazing. And just like some of the insights and stuff that you have is really interesting. So I'm glad we have you working in the space. You're a star. And don't counteract it by giving me a compliment back, because I'll edit it out. All right? Because I know you do that shit. So don't do that.
It's like, I'm like, oh, we love you in the space too, Jack.
Awesome, mate. Hey, thanks for coming on. Peace, everybody.
Peace.